Okay folks, we've got a Craftsman 6.75 horsepower pressure washer. We're having carburetor issues with it. It's just not running properly, so we're going to disassemble it, clean the carb on it, and put it back together and hopefully have a better result. So here's what we have. Craftsman exclusive 6.75, 2550 psi, 2 gallons a minute pressure washer. Stay tuned, we'll take this thing apart. First thing we're going to do is remove a couple of different shrouds here. Just some basic screws and stuff. Get this thing so we can see what we're doing. The first part here, this little throttle cover area, I've taken this screw off. We're going to remove it. Now we can kind of see inside here and see some of our throttle linkages. Next step, I'm going to remove here so I can pull this plate off. Folks, the air filter cover comes off here by just removing that little bolt. Then she'll pop off here. I got one hand, so it doesn't look all that dirty, but still be nice to put a new one in. Actually, I could probably blow that out with my air hose, but okay, here's where our air intake is. Get a couple of views of that for you guys. Looks like a few bolts holding this thing on here so we can start getting at the carburetor. So we'll take that apart, see what we have behind there. Okay folks, 3 bolts are out. It is 3 smaller bolts. Sorry about that. Like this. Take all 3 of them out. This is going to be connected by a vacuum hose, very likely. Sure enough, there it is. Okay. That goes into there. And now we can see our carburetor. Okay, here's a back shot of this. Alright, here's my son Carter, my little helper today. Say hi to everybody, Carter.
Hi.
What are we fixing today?
An air filter.
That's right, and a carburetor. Alright folks, stand by and we'll get at this carburetor and see what we can do next here. Alright folks, now you will see I have put a towel here because likely we're going to have some fuel leak. I just put gas in this thing this year to try and start it. Obviously we can't get it going, there's issues, so I don't want to dump that fuel out yet. I don't need to do that. It was empty, so it's new gas in the tank. So we want to leave that gas in there, so we simply just, I usually take a towel or something, put it around the hose so I'm not wrecking the hose with the clamp. And I just put a little vice grips on here, which will, sever off the fuel supply coming out of here. Then we remove this clamp, which was here, as you can see. Move it off to the side, and we're just going to pull this fuel line off. There'll likely be just a hair of residual fuel in there, which will catch on our rag that we have here below the carburetor, so we're not making a mess. Stand by and we'll see if we can get that off. Okay, a little tip here folks, that hose will not come off. It's tight on there. So what we're going to do is remove the carburetor and we'll just pull it off that way. We have a little bit more torque rather than trying to rip that hose with the pliers or who knows. I have no way to get parts today. It's Memorial Day, so I want to take it easy and just do it so I know I'm not going to wreck the darn thing and so I can get this thing going today. I have here a 3/8 inch socket, which is going to go on these 2 bolts that hold the carburetor to the engine. We're going to remove those 2 bolts. This carburetor will pop off, and we'll just use the carburetor to pull back, and we'll get that hose off a lot easier that way with minimal collateral damage. Okay, the bolts are removed. I should say, folks, be very careful with this gasket here. Okay? Likely again, if you're like me and you do these kind of projects when you're not working, especially on a holiday, you're not going to be able to get parts. And the gasket looks fine, but I want to be careful I don't wreck that thing or lose it or whatever. Now, I should be able to just pull this carburetor right off. Okay? Just kind of keep, make sure you take pictures of this, guys and girls, of how these things are all pointing and sitting and, the throttle linkages and the controls. Because if you don't remember how they go when you go to put this thing back together, it's just going to take 3 times as long. So I already took a whole bunch of photos. I do this every time, I take something like this apart just to be extra safe. So there you have it. That comes apart. We're going to take off this end of this spring, and this throttle linkage will come off. I'm probably not going to be able to show you until I get this thing off and flipped upside down. But we'll show you that in just a second. Then we'll have the carburetor off, and we can again take the carburetor, and we can just pull on this and get this hose to come off. Stand by. Okay, the carburetor has left the engine. Alright, sorry for the crappy joke. Alright, see this little hole right here? That's where that throttle was hooked to. Just this little deal here. Oops, sorry. Right there, bam. Just 90 degreed in that little hole. All you got to do is take the carburetor, bend it this way, and pull it out, and this will come off. Now, I wouldn't even mess with any of these controls in here. Just leave them there for now, because very likely that's not part of your problem. Your problem is here in the carburetor, which is likely gummed up. So we're going to take this apart, see what we find, and if it looks okay and doesn't seem to be any issues in there, then we can start messing with the other parts of the controls and the throttle and see if anything else is going on. But very likely it's either this or my plug, which I've already removed, my spark plug. Okay? Here's a trick, folks. Something I've done over the years to get fuel line off. See, it's already broke loose now because I finally got it. But what I do from time to time is I take a very small hobby screwdriver. Saying this with a grain of salt here, guys, but I very carefully break it under the line of the hose here like this. Of course, it's a lot tighter when I start this. And then I take your fine-tipped WD-40. I get it in there, and I just tap it once or twice. And what that does is it just breaks, gives me a little lubrication for when I pull this off. Then I take the carburetor and I actually twist it and break it loose, and then it'll come right off. So, with any luck, that's what happens. See, we got just a hair of residual fuel there, not much in that line. See? Because we've got it clamped up here. So there's our carburetor. Alright, very, very simple little apparatus here on a little pressure washer or lawnmower like this. So we're going to go ahead and begin taking this thing apart, and I'll show you exactly how to do that step by step, figure out what's wrong with it. Okay, here's pretty much everything we're going to need, folks, to do this job. First thing I recommend is a clean, spacious workspace when you're cleaning these things out. I start with a clean rag because I'm going to be taking this thing apart. I want to lay all my parts out nice and easy. Second thing I recommend is take your parts as you take them off and set them in a line or in a row so you know exactly which order they go back together. Third thing, I just want to give you guys the kind of heads up of what you're going to need. Just a general pair of pliers, screwdriver with a flathead, and a Phillips head reversible. This will reverse either way. And then I just like using my nut driver here rather than a ratchet on the smaller parts. It's just easier. And then of course your spark plug wrench. And WD-40, I said you may use that to get things cleaned up a little bit that you don't want to worry about getting on gaskets and stuff like that. You definitely don't want to use this gum mode carb cleaner on any of these rubber parts. Basically anything that's not metal that you can't blow out with your air gun. I always like to have an air compressor on hand, which, pardon the moving of the camera here, but right here I always, on the end of my workbench, back up and show you this, I always have that thing handy, when I'm cleaning stuff, so I can make sure any of my stuff that I'm cleaning, I can just air it out real quick and get rid of any excess. So again, here's what we're looking at, and this is where the port goes in. Got your vacuum line here and your fuel line here and your throttle up here. So stand by, we'll get this carb taken apart and see what the problem is. What I want to do is just dump the residual fuel out of the carburetor. There it goes, see? Probably won't be a whole lot in there, but just obviously have a different rag handy for this or a little drop pan or something. Just when we take this thing apart, it's not dripping all over our clean workspace, getting all over our hands. That ought to do it. First thing we're going to do is remove this bowl. That's likely where most of our problem's going to be. Can you say crap? Gasket was not good. I thought it was, but it's not. Junk. See that? We don't want that thing leaking. Okay, what do we do now? It's Memorial Day. I have no way to go get a gasket. I mean, maybe Walmart might have it in their small engines, but I highly doubt it. So what do? We take our razor blade and we clean this off. Get it nice and clean again. Be careful not to score the metal, okay, all around here. That would be bad. Take your time. Do it easily without wrecking anything. So I happen to have this in my workshop, okay, RTV gasket maker. Now, I'd rather just use a gasket, either from the manufacturer, or just typical OEM type gasket type stuff at Fleet Farm or your local farm and small engine store, hardware store, whatever. Not available to me right now, so because it's a holiday. So what we do, this Walmart's typically open on holidays. Go to Walmart, get something like this, RTV gasket maker. Worst case scenario, guys, it took me 10 minutes to get this carburetor off. It'll work fine. Eventually, if you get the right part and you want to switch to it down the road, you can, but this will get us through no problem. So that's what we got to do. We're going to clean this up. Bam! Ready to remove. We're going to take it off. You'll see the little gasket on there. Careful you don't lose that. Then our bowl is going to pop right off here. Try not to do it with a camera in your hand, because if you've never done this before, you're going to want to watch where all these, parts may fall. Oh yeah, she's pretty gummed up in there. Very likely the float has been sticking to that bowl. Okay, here's what she looks like. That is your carburetor float. Very simple little roll pin here, holding your float in. Pull that body out of there. Grab our float. Our needle valve is going to come loose. Okay, there's our float. Now sometimes they've got a little metal apparatus, very, very, very small metal apparatus holding this needle valve to the float. This one appears not to have that, but be careful if it does, because it is very thin, very fragile. You pull out the needle valve here. Show you what that kind of looks like. Sorry, kind of blurry. Back up here. Okay, very simple. This is what allows fuel into the carburetor. Alright, when it needs fuel, this float will float up and it'll open that needle valve out of this little hole, and that's where your fuel comes into the carburetor bowl. Here's your fuel line. Okay, this is where your fuel comes in here, and then again, if you look down in that little hole, that little tiny deal right there, it's where your needle valve sits on my pointer finger there, not my thumb. And the carburetor bowl will float that needle valve up this way and allow fuel to come into the bowl, which is why they call it a carburetor bowl, see? And the fuel will sit in here. There you have it. Time to get to work and clean. Now you can see corrosion and stuff in here. We need to take this apart a little bit more and clean her out. The inside of this carb is very, very dirty. There are all these little crystals in there. Since we're going to clean the crap out of this thing, I recommend you remove this gasket here, your carburetor bowl gasket, okay? It's still sticking a little on this end. I wanted to show you. Sometimes this thing is glued down, so it seems, and you got to take a tiny little screwdriver and just slowly work it free, because we do not want carburetor cleaner getting on this thing. Normally I don't even remove this because I don't spray that much carb cleaner in there. Anyways, I just use it sparingly enough to get the gum out of the carburetor, and then we're done. But in this case, again, I don't know if you can see all those little sparkles. This thing is dirty. I want to really spray this thing good. So I'm going to take anything plastic or rubber off of here so I can give this thing a good carb cleaning bath and make sure that we're going back fresh again. This may sound corny, I know, but I'm a dad of 2 young boys. These things are very dangerous for kids. Alright, it doesn't look or seem like it might be, but if they spray that thing in their eye, goodbye eyeball. So always hang these things up and out of the way so your kids can't reach them. And don't ever leave your air in your air compressor if you got little kids. Take the air out. If they were to get a hold of that thing, you'll never forgive yourself. Bam! Clean! Alright? So I've got all that residual scraped off nicely, and we are ready to keep taking this thing apart. Obviously we're not going to use the gasket maker yet because we're not ready to put it back together. We haven't cleaned it yet. So okay, so bottom of the carburetor is a 1/2 inch bolt. See that? Bam! 1/2 inch. Craftsman. Only the best. My favorite set right there. I love having that thing next to these small projects. We're going to go ahead and remove the bottom of the carburetor bowl. Okay, my name's not Joe Safety, it's Jeff Herrick. But you see these things? Safety glasses? Bam! Let me tell you guys, I learned twice the hard way. Gum out carbon choke cleaner, the worst thing to get in your eye. It's the worst thing I've ever had in my eye anyways. It's happened to me 2 times in my life, and I will never do it again. First time was 45 minutes of pure agony, thinking I should go to the ER washing water through my eyes. It hurts that bad. So just wear the stupid glasses and you ain't got to worry about this. I mean, I even have these darn goggles right here for when I'm really getting crazy spraying. because it hurts so bad. I learned the hard way. I'm not a big, flagging a safety advocate kind of guy, but it's something you should know, especially if it's your first time using this stuff. Use the glasses and you ain't got to worry about it. You've been warned. Alright folks, here we go. All my parts are removed as far as gaskets and that. I'm going to go ahead and spray in here. See how that's spraying all over? It probably hit the screen already. I'm going to let this stuff sit in here. Soak onto my carb. There's that portion of it. Got myself a little brush here. And I'm just going to work it in there, moving all of my plastic pieces out of the way. Alright, work it in, get rid of all that residual garbage. There's my son, he's helping me out. He sees bubbles, he says. That's good, Carter, that means it's doing some cleaning in here, which is what we need. So anyways, we're going to do the whole carb like this. Clean it up, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like when we're all finished. Folks, what I just did is I took all my gaskets in the house, including the float, and I washed them in soap and water, just in case any carb cleaner got on them in the fact of me spraying out here. It really can do a number on your gaskets, which would make you have to do this job all over again. So they're all clean now. I cleaned each one of them with soap and water and dried them off. Okay, the next important thing here, guys, is to clean the bottom of this float out. This bowl out. I just sprayed carb cleaner in there and cleaned it up the best I could. It's pretty simple. Next thing, take your needle valve and clean it. While you're at it, take your roll pin, clean it. Okay, carburetor itself is all clean. I took carb cleaner to it inside and out, sprayed it out with my air gun. See this? Can't see them crystals really anymore. It's all cleaned out and dry, ready to put back together. One thing you may want to check, guys, I've done a number of carburetors now. Just make sure you can get passable air where you're supposed to get passable air, such as the fuel intake here, from here to here. And then if you put air in here, you'll see air come out these residual little, I don't even know what they exactly are, but air will come out here when you spray in here. And I guess it takes a while to get to know what is going to come out where, guys, but once you do it once or twice, you'll kind of understand it. But just make sure, because there could be, gummed up passages in there that you don't even know about. You do all this for nothing. So that's what I always do, is just make sure you got air passing through. You don't need an air compressor. Just, I know it sounds funny, but put your mouth on there and blow. And if you can feel air coming out, you're good. It's typically a rule of thumb, I guess. So just, check this all over and make sure all the parts are moving. You don't have any, any gum stopping stuff from moving. You see how this moves freely. Sometimes what will happen, guys, is right in here is where most of the gum will end up, and the butterfly will end up sticking on it. Okay? And it won't be able to move freely. That's part of the problem. A lot of times it'll be stuck open, gas will pour out of it, so on and so forth. Alright, our next step is to put this float assembly back in. First thing we're going to do is take the float, drop it into place, okay? We got our gasket sitting on here. Make sure that thing is seated exactly where you want it and where you need it, okay? The thing may want to flow over the edges. You don't want that to happen, because when we put this bowl back on, it's got to sit perfect. Alright, next thing we're going to do, alright, we're going to lift the float up. We're going to grab our needle valve. We're going to slide it into the appropriate slot here. Let me show you that. Okay? There she goes. Bam. Sits into that little slot. Comes over. Let's take this off for now. Come down in here. It's going to sit right in place. Right in place for our roll pin to come sliding through these two holes. You got a hole on this side and a hole on this side. Take our pin, pop it through. Trying to make this as quick as possible, folks, so I don't have a 20-minute video here. Bam. Okay? Make sure you got some free-flowing motion. That's what happens when the fuel fills up in the carburetor. That allows it to lift the needle valve and allow more fuel to come in. Take your gasket, get it reseated here so the flat side is showing up, which is going to accept the bowl, like so. Hold that in place. Make sure she's straight. We're going to make sure our gasket is on here for our bolt. We'll get her threaded. Again, this is a 1/2 inch standard socket. Be careful threading this, guys, because it's brass. Now, before I tighten this 100%, I'm going to get it just to where it's about tight, and I'm going to double check all the way around the perimeter of this bowl. And I'm going to make darn sure that that gasket's not hanging out and squished in any way, shape, or form. And it's not. I'm going to go ahead and tighten it tight. Done. Now what I've done, folks, and I've done this before, is I just put enough of that RTV silicone gasket maker where I had the break in the gasket. Still want to let it cure before you fire this thing up. But that should be your ticket. I think you'll be fine with that. Now you got to be real careful you don't have a bunch of stuff spewing over inside of this carb where the butterfly is going to grab it or get caught on it. So you want to get this tight and cured, but you want to make sure there's no residual over coming down into this carburetor. That would be bad. I've just placed the carburetor back in place. I've got one bolt in just to start it. Okay. The other hole here is where my next bolt's going to go. Alright, let's just tighten these up. One-handed is fun while holding a camera. There we go. Torque them on there pretty good. Move to my other bolts here. Okay. Fuel line back on here. First thing I did is I dropped a squirt of WD-40 in that line. Not a lot, just a drop. Took a little Q-tip and squirt around the inside of that so it would come on there real nice. Alright, I'm going to move this clamp back into place. Alright, and then we'll be ready to release our clamp on the carburetor fuel line. Okay, now, clamp is replaced. I realize that's not your ideal look for a gasket, guys, but this will work. Once I get this plate pushed back on here, I'm going to make sure I got some gasket maker here, which is going to seal that gap over time. I'm not going to be able to run this for a little while, about probably 6 to 8 hours. It says it's fully cures in 24 hours, but if I'm just using a little bit there, I'm sure we'll be fine. But now, if we wanted to, we could release our clamp and the fuel. There we go. And you can see because I put a towel on here that it didn't hurt this fuel line, you see? Kind of straighten this back out. Now, if you just put the metal clamp on there, you could have issues. Again, you don't want to leave this clamp for too long because of the strands in the hose. May have a memory to it a little bit, but there we go. Now we're going to put our cover back on here for our air box. Got my air box manifold back on here. The 1, 2, 3 bolts are back on. Some of you, I forgot I had gas in this tank, guys. If you release this, obviously the fuel's going to come down. If you have your choke open, it's going to come dripping out. So you're better off just to leave this clamp on until you're ready to make this thing happen and put it all back together. I also got my plug put back in. Took my plug and I cleaned it up real well. I don't have it put back in completely, but I took my plug, cleaned it up with a wire brush. Okay, so it's clean. I just take it to a wire brush, vigorously through there, get it clean, put it back on. Get your spark plug wrench. Make sure it's firm, but not over tighten these things. Don't over tighten it. We're going to take our spark plug wrench real quick here, and we'll just get this thing. I'll show you about how tight I get them. That is about it. Sorry guys, right about there. Bam. There's that. What we're going to do now, finish putting this air box back on here and give this thing a whirl. Okay guys, we got this thing all put back together. We'll come in here and just show you kind of what she looks like. I didn't put that top plate back on there just yet, right here, because chances are, if this doesn't start for some odd reason, I'm going to have to pull it all back off here. So we'll give this a shot real quick. Hopefully she fires right back up, then we can put our plate on and we're all done. Bam! There you go, folks. Running like a champ.